All right, so today we're going to attempt a pretty complicated feat. We're going to be looking at Power BI for beginners, specifically for architect, BIM managers, VDC managers, anybody who's in the world of BIM and wants to go into Power BI. So we're going to be skipping a lot of the pure data things, but I realized there wasn't really that content created for this particular audience, and I wanted to help you step up without getting lost in tutorials that are not going to be looking at what you need to learn. So what I've done is I've prepared 4 tabs in Excel that are going to be looking at a very simple scenarios of orders, of products, of staff, and stores. And this very simple concept is going to allow us to start crawling, to start walking before we can start running. We're going to look at the basics without getting lost with 30 plus tables and all of these crazy things. But this should be small enough to look at the basic concepts that we can build upon in our skill tree. So the big concept that we have is basically a database. And the way that databases work is through connection with keys. We see it here. For example, these are all orders in this imaginary project. So somebody ordered one thing, one product on this date, and this is the key, the ID of the product, and this is the key of the staff who sold the product. So if we go in the product table and look at number 3, they bought a bike wheel for $50, and the bike wheel actually cost the company $20, and there's a model number. And if we look at the staff number, was staff number 1. So Johnny Smith is the one who sold this item, and Johnny Smith is at the store 1, which is in New York in the United States and has this time zone. So all of this data, when we set it up in Power BI, is going to talk to each other, and we're basically going to learn very basic data modeling concepts with these tables. We have another video on a couple of settings to change before you start messing with Power BI, so we recommend that you go look at that video first. But we will start here by obtaining the data, and we're going to click on Get Data. And here we see Power BI is just a data monster, right? It can grab data from a website, from a SharePoint, from Excel, from a CSV file, pretty much anything, including things like PDF. So you can go through this list, and then there's going to be other connectors here, like Revisto, etc., ACC. But here we're just going to do it very simple through Excel. And actually, we'll learn later that it's probably smarter to do it through a SharePoint, but right now we're just going to keep it super simple for the tutorial and go directly to Excel. So here we have our tutorial file, and we're going to import that. So right away, we see the pages that we've created. And it's important that when you create a page, it starts at A1, right? You don't want to just have a bunch of weird data or place your data in a random location like this. You really wanted to be properly ordered so that A1 is where the table starts, the first row is your titles, and so forth. So we can click on these and look at the data real quick, and this kind of shows us that everything is fine. The data is coming in as expected. It's capturing the titles. There's no blanks. There's nothing anomalous here that we see right now. So what we're going to do is import all 4 of these tables. And we're actually going to go directly into transform data. Actually, let's not do that. Let's just load it. And if you just loaded it, well, it's going to chug the data for a little bit just to bring it in. Should be pretty quick because it's quite small. So if you didn't click transform data, you can then click it here. And this is going to be the world of Power Query or transform data. It's kind of like secretly it's Power Query, but here it says transform data. So we're going to go into Power Query where the data cleanup, the data pipeline is established. And it's very important to understand this mysterious world of Power Query. So in here, we see all of our tables, and we see the data, and then we see the steps applied. And this is going to be one of the most important things about Power Query. So if we look, this is the source of our data. This is the first thing that Power BI was looking at. And then it decided to navigate to a particular table. Notice here how the titles are the first row, and it automatically detects that and it promotes the headers, meaning it takes the first row and brings it into here. It also has automatically detected some of the data types. So it knows, for example, that these are just numbers. If we go back one, see here it says numbers and letters. So that's not really good because you can't sum text. You can't sum strings. You're going to see the word string. String is basically text. So you can't sum text, right? You can only sum numbers. So it's very important to identify when there's something that is a number. So looking at this real quick, it seems that all of the numbers have been automatically detected, so that's good. If it is not properly detecting a number, you'll need to change it here. And notice how there's a couple different numbers. There's whole numbers, so numbers with no decimals. You can't have 1.1, you can only have 1, right? Whereas if there are decimals, you would need to select decimal numbers here. So far, everything has been automatically detected, so there's no reason for me to make any modifications in here unless there were issues with the data that I need to clean up or anything like that. So I'm just going to go here and click close and apply, in which case there's nothing new that's really happening, so it's not going to calculate anything. Okay, now that we have ingested our data, we're going to want to actually connect it. So we're going to go in this tab here called Model View, and these tabs are extremely important. Report is where you create the report. Table is where you can look at the raw data, and model is where you connect the data together. And the first thing that you'll need to learn about Power BI data modeling is what's called the star schema. So the star schema is pretty complicated. Weirdly enough, in Power BI, the most complicated thing that you need to do is the data model, and it's the first thing that you need to do. So it's a huge problem because if you mess it up, it messes up everything you're going to do in the future. So the data model is what we're going to look at here, and what you want is what's called a fact table. And the fact table is usually going to be the smallest kind of unit of data that you're tracking. It could be every purchase. It could be, in the case of BIM, it's going to be every element. It could even be perhaps every parameter. So there's different philosophies there, but you're not, at the end of the day, you're not counting stores, you're not counting employees, you're counting the sales per employee, the sales per store, the sales per product. So the orders or the sales are the middle of your star schema from which everything relies upon. So we're going to put the orders table right in the middle here, and I do like to kind of resize my table so that it fits the size of the data that's in here. Now let's take a quick moment again to look at our orders table, and we've got these things called keys, and the keys are really what connects. So the product key is going to connect to the key in the product table, and this is just a very universal concept of keys connecting to each other. So what we're going to do in here is drag the product key from the orders table onto the key in the product table. And this table pops up and it's saying, okay, I got these different keys. Are you sure this is the right connection to have? And so we're going to click yes. We're actually also going to set this to both right now. So that means the data can flow in both directions. All right, next we're going to connect the staff key to the staff key. And once again, we're going to select both sides for the direction of the filter. And then lastly, we're going to connect the staff store to the store key here. And there's a bit of an issue with the naming. I should have written store_key, but we get it. We can click both and click continue. Okay, so this is not a perfect star schema, because a regular star schema would have the fact table in the middle and only one dimension table coming from every side. And what we're seeing here in the data world is called snowflaking. So in this example, everything in black is a pure star schema. And then this second dimension that is connected to an extra dimension, that's called snowflaking. So anytime you're not purely looking at a schema like this, that's a pure star schema. Anytime you go beyond that, it's called snowflaking. It's not the end of the world, but you don't want to have that all over the place. And we're going to actually address it in the data model by merging these two tables together to remove the snowflaking altogether. All right, let's do a couple of things to this data model to clean it up a bit more before we go ahead. So One thing we'll never need is basically these keys. These keys that we use are for connection only. So what we can do is we can hide them in the report view. We'll never need to use the keys for staff or for product. So let's hide these. And we could have done this right here as well. You have an option to hide in the report view. We're also going to hide the store key here. And what we're going to want to do is a little matrix. So our matrix is going to be different than a table. A table isn't able to group things together. It's just going to make a list, whereas a matrix can start grouping things and then showing data down here. So let's try to figure out which store has the most sales. So we're going to bring in as a row the name of the store. And notice how I'm always working in the visualization and data tabs. Those are your courses. So this is where you're going to spend most of your time. So we have the name of the store, and let's just see how many orders we're getting in total per store. We don't want the sum, we want the count, because the sum is just going to sum up these numbers, right? Let's say this is an order and this is an order and this is an order. Well, this is not 7 orders, this is 1 order. So if you sum it up, it's just going to add that number 7. Whereas if you count, it's going to say, well, that's 1, and that's 1, and that's 1, and that's 1. And the thing about keys, they're all different, right? You can't have a key that repeats itself. So sometimes you'd have to like count distinct, so it doesn't count keys that are the same values. But here we don't really need to count distinct because they're all going to be the same because they're keys. So already we're seeing there's more orders in New York City than in Seoul and Montreal. Let's bring the cost in here as well. So actually, no, sorry, let's bring the price to see how much we've sold. And it's giving us something weird, right? It's doing a count of the price. Here we actually want a sum. So it seems to show that we have more sales in New York once again, but not by a lot. And we can also bring in the staff into this. So we're going to bring in the name of the staff as one of the rows here. And notice now we can start drilling up and down to see which staff has done how many sales based on the location. So these are our rows. That's the name of the store and that's the name of the staff. So that's why in this matrix, we're able to do what's called drilling up and down. So drilling up is opening these variations here or using the arrows to navigate and open up and close. Okay, so looking at the data, I already know there's some problems. If we go back in the orders, we'll notice that there's a quantity here, right? It's saying, hey, they sold 4 bikes, but really right now we're just getting the number of the bikes from here. So we're not doing that multiplication by 2 or by 4 or by 3, etc. We are just getting the price of a single bike. So what we'll have to do in the order is start getting some of that price money from the product itself and bringing it in here. And to do that, we'll need to go into the transform data once again. So what we'll want to do in the transform data, instead of just relying on linking, is to merge some of these tables together. So in here, we're actually going to solve 2 problems. We're going to merge the staff and the store data together first, and then we're going to grab the price from the order so we can get a total price in each order from the product table. So let's do the staff first. So how do we get the store information? We're going to use the merge queries. So we already have the ID of the store here. We're going to select that at the top of the table here. And down here, we're going to go to the store and click the key. And notice how it says 4 of 4 rows are matching. So that means it's finding store 1, 2, and 3 in this list. There's no outlier, right? There's no like banana store or random number store that doesn't exist in both lists. So that's good. Now notice when I'm going to click OK, it's going to add a new table all the way here to the right. And it's not a regular table. Well, first off, it tells us it's a table, and look at the icon here. This allows us to expand that table. So that was the first step. We merged the query, and if we go back, you'll notice it disappears. But now we're going at the bottom of our applied step, and now we're going to expand this. And we don't need the key, but we're going to bring in everything else. We're going to bring in the name, province, and country and time zone of that store. Now there's this option here, use original column name as prefix. Let's just keep it on for now. Now it's saying store.name, store.state, province, etc. It's bringing all of that store information down into the staff table so that they are a single table. And notice we've just basically merged these two tables together. So we are no longer snowflaking. We have simply merged this data into a single entity down here. So we're getting closer to a perfect data model. All right, now that we have the store information in the staff table, we can basically unload the store table. So by right-clicking on here and deselecting enable load, it's being used as a transformation. It's feeding the table of the staff, but it's no longer loading when we're going to go into Power BI in our regular model view. And notice how it does a slight italic. I could even decide to put it in a group so that it just goes by itself. And that way we have queries that are not loaded and queries that are loaded. Here we can perhaps group this under a better name. All right, so these are now our main tables, and then we can just move this all the way down so we can focus on our main table. For now, let's just close and apply this and see what the result is. So notice now we have less tables. It's getting a bit clearer. And if we go to the staff, we have all of the store information down here. So we no longer need the store data. Now there's a problem, right? Because we were using one of those store fields. So it's giving us an error and we see where the error comes from. So we're going to grab the store field now from the staff table. So we see it right here, store.name, and let's drag that up there. And all of a sudden we're back to where we were earlier before data transformation. Okay, let's go back into Power Query. Actually, now's a good time to save. So let's go ahead and we'll go back into Power Query and do the next transformation of bringing in those product prices and those product information in here. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to merge the queries. And here we're going to select the product key. Down here, we are going to look at the product table and select the key again. Now notice once again, 30 out of the 30 rows are matching. Now, if you have tables with millions of rows, it's going to take much longer to calculate this, but here we get the information immediately. And this is also a good way of validating your data to make sure that there is a one-to-one relationship, that there's no missing data on either side. So at this point, I'm ready to click OK. Same thing's going to happen. We have a new column after our merge of the data, and we can expand this. Now, I'm not going to bring in the key. I don't need that. I am going to bring everything else, and I'm going to keep the prefix. All right, so here's our information. That's fantastic. Let's take a step back here in our history. As you probably realize, we can step back in our history and look at things that have changed. We can even go back and do changes in between these steps. Another thing that's really important is this little gear icon here. This lets us kind of go back in our steps, right? So here, if I wanted to write potato, now notice how the name of all of these columns is coming in as potato. So obviously we're going to have this as product. But if you wanted to change the nomenclature, or perhaps you decide, hey, you know what, I don't want the prefix, you can remove it. And it's very unclear because it just says name, but you can change the prefix and kind of go back. You could also undo this by just clicking away from it and then, undoing, redoing, and so forth. So this is a very important thing in your query, especially if some of your data changes and messes up your calculation. Another thing that's important is this concept here of the advanced editor. So the advanced editor is basically a codified way of writing everything that you've done in here. So this is the kind of easy user way of looking at things. This is the hard-coded way. And you'll notice every time we do one of these steps, there's some code up here that we could change. And sometimes you will want to change it. Like, let's try to read this for a second. So it says we're expanding this new column that we have that's a bunch of tables, and these are the columns you were getting, and this is what we are calling them. So here, for example, if I wanted to change just this one to potato, I could simply change the code, and now it says potato.name. So for example, here, if I double click on it and I write potato, it's going to create a new step, right? So the more steps you have, the slower your calculation is. So if you can just go in here and make some of those modifications, it's going to make things faster. Now, obviously that was a silly example, so I brought it back to product name. Okay, so we have our product in here. At this point, we don't really need the product table anymore because everything of the product lives in the order. So I'm going to unload the product table and bring it in the not loaded tables down here. Now let's click close and apply. Well, as usual, we've done our data modeling after the fact of creating a simple table. So it's messed everything up. I'm just going to delete this field here. And actually, I realize I need to go right back into Power Query because we're not calculating the total cost, right? If we go into Power Query and we look at our orders, it says we bought 2 of these products, we bought 2 wheels, and the price of a wheel is $20 or $50. Now we need a new column that does quantity times product price. And another thing that we don't need is the product key. All of the information from the product is in this table. So I can select this and I'm going to click delete simply. And now notice how down here it says I've removed the column. So we are getting the data tighter by doing this. Okay, so our next step is to make a new column that says quantity times product price. And we may even want one that says quantity times product cost. So what we're going to do is go into the add column and click custom column. So actually, I notice that there's a bit of an inconsistency in the names. It says products, whereas it should probably just say product with no S. So what I'm going to do is just go in my expansion here and undo the S. Before I start playing with those columns, I'm already dissatisfied with the name. So let's fix the data before we start adding more steps, because if we remove the S later, all of the steps under it are going to look for a column that no longer exists because it used to have an S and now it no longer has an S, etc. So we got rid of our S right away. Let's go and add this custom column. So we're going to call this product cost total. And I'm just going to click here on quantity times cost. And these are 2 numbers, so I don't need to make any modification. If one was text, I would need to convert it first. Okay, so we have our new table down here. So we can see 4 times 400 is 1600. Let's do that again. We'll add a custom column for the price. So we're going to call this product price total. And once again, quantity times price. Okay, we have our 2 new columns, and looking at it real quick, it does seem to make sense. So we are ready to go home, close, and apply. All right, so we're looking right now at the store, the staff, and how many sales, how many orders they have of everything. We may actually want to look at, the quantity of elements that they sold. So in here, I can drag the quantity, and now I can also drag the price total. And it's picking up the wrong thing, right? It's saying, oh, actually, this is interesting. It's picking up the wrong thing. It's saying first price. And why do you think that is? When we select price total, we notice that it is text. So, hey, guess what? We need to go right back into transform data. And we're going to go in our orders and make sure that we're actually using the right units here. Now, there's probably a smarter way of just changing this formula here and telling it to be numbers, but I don't quite know what that is. So I'm going to do it the kind of silly way by clicking down here and by saying these are decimal numbers who knows, a price could be, could have a decimal number instead of being a whole number, for example. So I've changed the units. I'm going to click close and apply. And all of a sudden, our data starts to make a little bit more sense. Now notice it says minimum. We definitely don't want minimum. We want the sum. All right, now this is looking right. So notice how it was doing a bunch of weird stuff, right? When we just brought this down here, now it's showing us the sum instead of the minimum, but you have the ability, like when you click on here, you can decide which one it should do by default. So this is correct. It should do the sum instead of, minimum, for example. But you could have the minimum, right? Or like the maximum. So for example, if I put the max here, it's going to show me this is the biggest sale that you had per store per person. So we're going to bring that back to sum, obviously. And if we think for a second, what we can do is we can actually bring a lot of granularity in here and bring in the actual orders. So the key, remember, that was the unique number of the order. So we can actually bring that into our matrix hierarchy. And when we go down here, we're going to see every order. Now, what would be good in here is to also write down the product name. So let's do that. We'll bring in the product name. And we're starting to see our data make some sense. Now, keep in mind, product name is not something that you can sum up, right? So here at this level of granularity, every order has a single product name. And this is our order numbers, basically, or our order keys. However, if we drill up, it's just going to show us the first thing in that list, right? So obviously, the only thing that they sold in Montreal is not bike. They sold multiple things in Montreal, but you need to go to the granular level to start getting that data because text cannot be summed up. When you look at the options for text, it's first or last or count. So if you go to count distinct, really what you're saying is how many different types of text were there in there. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. So this was a long tutorial to begin with, but hopefully it gave you some ideas of what Power BI does for ingesting the data, doing a pipeline to transform it so that we can bring it into a star schema, or in this case, in a very simple star schema. And then how does that relationship happen when we're in the report and we want to make this data talk to each other? So this is very embryonic. We're going to start adding some colors on here. We're going to start chopping the data in more interesting ways, doing some graphs and so forth. So stay with us for part 2 and let us know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.